They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I never understood what that meant until I watched Marcus's face crumble as I walked down the aisle toward another man. The same man he'd spent 3 years pining over, the same man who'd rejected him in college, the same man who was now about to become my husband. The look in Marcus's eyes that day wasn't just surprise or hurt. It was the dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from the moment my world shattered into 1,000 pieces on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. It was supposed to be our 3-year anniversary. I'd been planning for weeks, saving up money from my part-time job at the campus bookstore to buy Marcus something special. We were both broke college students, but I'd managed to scrape together enough to get him that vintage watch he'd been eyeing in the antique shop downtown. I was so excited, practically vibrating with anticipation as I walked up to his apartment door that evening. I had my key, of course. We'd been together long enough that we'd exchanged keys months ago. I remember feeling so mature, so adult about it, like we were a real couple heading toward something permanent. God, I was so naive. The door was unlocked, which was weird because Marcus was paranoid about security. I called out as I stepped inside, juggling the gift box and a bottle of wine I'd splurged on. "Marcus? Babe, I'm here!" Silence. That should have been my first clue, but I was too caught up in my own excitement to notice. I walked through the living room, expecting to find him in his bedroom, maybe getting ready for our dinner reservation. The apartment felt different somehow. There was an energy in the air that made my skin prickle, but I pushed the feeling aside. I pushed open his bedroom door, and my heart stopped. Marcus was there, all right, but he wasn't alone, and he wasn't getting ready for our anniversary dinner. He was with Sarah. Sarah fucking Henderson, the girl from our psychology class who always sat in the front row and asked too many questions. The girl who'd been texting him study questions at all hours of the night. The girl I'd specifically asked him about, only to be told I was being paranoid and insecure. They were so wrapped up in each other that they didn't even notice me standing in the doorway. I watched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, as Marcus whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. The same laugh I'd thought was mine. The same intimate whisper I'd thought was reserved for me. The gift box slipped from my hands and hit the floor with a loud thud. That's when they noticed me. Sarah scrambled to cover herself, her face flushed with embarrassment and something that might have been guilt. But Marcus just looked annoyed. Not guilty, not sorry, not even surprised. Just annoyed that I'd interrupted them. "Emma," he said, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. "What are you doing here?" What was I doing there? In his apartment with the key he'd given me on our anniversary, like we'd planned? The question was so absurd that for a moment I couldn't speak. I just stood there, holding the bottle of wine like an idiot, trying to process what I was seeing. "It's our anniversary," I managed to whisper. Marcus had the audacity to look confused for a moment, like he'd genuinely forgotten. Then something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, but irritation. Like I was an inconvenience he needed to deal with. "Look, Emma, we need to talk," he said, not even bothering to get up from the bed. "This isn't working out. This isn't working out. 3 years of my life, 3 years of love and support and planning our future together, and he summarized it as, 'This isn't working out,' while another woman sat in his bed, watching our relationship implode like it was entertainment. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "How long what? How long have you been fucking her?" Sarah made a small noise of protest, but Marcus just shrugged. "Does it matter? Does it matter?" Of course it mattered. It mattered that every time I'd asked about her, he'd made me feel crazy for being suspicious. It mattered that he'd been lying to my face for God knows how long. It mattered that he'd let me plan this anniversary dinner, let me buy him a gift, let me believe we had a future together. "Yes," I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "It matters to me." Marcus sighed like I was being difficult. "A few months." "Look, Emma, you're a great girl, but we want different things. You're always talking about the future, about plans and careers and, I don't know, settling down. I'm not ready for that kind of commitment. A few months?" He'd been cheating on me for a few months, and I'd been so stupidly in love that I hadn't seen it. All those late study sessions, all those nights he was too tired to see me, all those times he'd pulled away when I tried to talk about our future. It all made sense now. "So you decided to cheat instead of just breaking up with me?" I asked. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, but there was no remorse in his voice. "It just did. And honestly, Maybe this is for the best. We're not right for each other, Emma. You want some fairy tale life, but I'm not that guy. I'm never gonna be that guy." The wine bottle was still in my hands, and for a moment, I had the wild urge to throw it at him, to watch it shatter against the wall, to make some kind of dramatic gesture that would match the chaos in my chest. But I didn't. I just stood there, absorbing the fact that the man I'd loved for 3 years was calmly destroying our relationship while his mistress sat in his bed. "You're right," I said finally. "You're not that guy." I turned to leave, but Marcus called after me. "Emma, wait." I stopped, and for a moment I thought he might apologize. I thought he might show some tiny shred of remorse for what he'd done, some acknowledgement that this wasn't the way to end things. Instead, he said, "Look, I know you're hurt and I get it. But don't do anything dramatic, okay? Don't go telling everyone we know or posting about it online or whatever. Let's just let this end quietly. Let it end quietly." Like our relationship was something shameful that needed to be hidden, instead of 3 years of my life that deserved better than this pathetic ending. "Don't worry," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "I won't be telling anyone about this. I have more dignity than that." As I walked back through his apartment, I heard Sarah's voice, soft and questioning. Should we be worried about her? And Marcus's response, so casual and dismissive that it carved itself into my memory. "Emma? Nah. She'll cry for a week, maybe 2, then she'll come crawling back. She always does. She doesn't have the spine to actually leave. Come crawling back. Like I was some pathetic creature who couldn't survive without him. Like I was so desperate and needy that I'd accept being cheated on and humiliated as long as I could keep him in my life." I made it to my car before the tears started. I sat in the parking lot of his apartment complex, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe, clutching the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The gift box was still on his floor, forgotten in my shock and hurt. That stupid vintage watch I'd saved for, that I'd been so excited to give him, was now sitting in the bedroom where he'd betrayed me. But it wasn't just the cheating that broke me. It was the casual cruelty of it all. The way he'd looked at me like I was an inconvenience. The way he'd predicted my reaction like I was some predictable, pathetic thing. The way he'd made me feel small and desperate and worthless. I drove home in a daze, my eyes so swollen from crying that I could barely see the road. My apartment felt empty and cold, full of reminders of Marcus. His sweatshirt draped over my chair. Pictures of us on the refrigerator. A toothbrush in my bathroom. 3 years of shared memories turned into evidence of my own stupidity. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our relationship. Every red flag I'd ignored. Every time he'd made me feel like I was asking for too much. Every time he'd pulled away when I tried to get closer. It was all there, painted in neon signs I'd somehow missed. But it wasn't just the betrayal that kept me awake. It was his words. "She'll come crawling back. She always does. She doesn't have the spine to actually leave." Did I always crawl back? I thought about our fights, our rough patches, the times he'd been distant or dismissive. Had I always been the one to apologize first, to smooth things over, to make excuses for his behavior? The answer was the uncomfortable yes. I was the one who always texted first after an argument. I was the one who overlooked his flaws and made excuses for his shortcomings. I was the one who'd convinced myself that love meant accepting whatever scraps of affection he was willing to give me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was pathetic. Maybe I was the kind of person who would crawl back, who would accept being treated like garbage as long as it meant I wasn't alone. The thought made me sick. I called in sick to work the next day and the day after that. I couldn't face the world. Couldn't pretend everything was normal when my entire life had been revealed as a lie. I stayed in bed, ordering takeout and crying until I had no tears left. My phone buzzed constantly, messages from friends asking if I was okay. Missed calls from my mom, but nothing from Marcus. Not an apology, not an explanation, not even a text asking if I'd picked up my stuff. He'd already moved on, already forgotten about me. It was my best friend Katie who finally staged an intervention. She showed up at my apartment on day 3 with ice cream and tissues and a determination to drag me out of my depression. "Okay," she said, settling onto my couch like she was planning to stay a while. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about finding Marcus and Sarah together, about his casual dismissal of our relationship, about the way he'd predicted I'd come crawling back. Katie listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each detail. "What a piece of shit," she said when I finished. "I'm sorry, Em. I know you loved him, but he's a complete asshole." "Maybe," I said, pulling a blanket tighter around myself. But maybe he's right too. Maybe I am pathetic. Maybe I would have crawled back if I'd given myself the chance. Katie stared at me for a long moment. Is that what you think? That you're pathetic? I don't know what I think anymore, I admitted. I feel like such an idiot. 3 years, Katie. 3 years of my life wasted on someone who never actually cared about me. They weren't wasted, Katie said firmly. You loved him. That's not pathetic, that's human. But you know what would be pathetic? Letting him win. What do you mean? I mean proving him right. Sitting here feeling sorry for yourself, letting him convince you that you're weak and desperate. He expects you to fall apart, Emma. He expects you to come crawling back, begging for another chance. Don't give him the satisfaction. I wanted to argue, to tell her that I didn't care what Marcus thought anymore. But that would have been a lie. I did care. I cared that he saw me as weak and predictable. I cared that he thought I had no spine. I cared that he'd reduced me to someone who would accept any treatment as long as it meant I could keep him. What am I supposed to do? I asked. Pretend I'm not hurt? Pretend I don't care? No, Katie said. You're supposed to prove him wrong. You're supposed to show him that you're stronger than he thinks, that you're better than he deserves. It sounded nice in theory, but I couldn't imagine how to actually do it. I felt broken, hollowed out, like Marcus had taken some essential part of me when he'd dismissed our relationship so casually. I don't know how to be strong right now, I admitted. Then fake it, Katie said. Fake it until you make it. Get up, get dressed, go back to school. Show him that you're not falling apart. Show him that you don't need him to function. The next morning, I forced myself to get up and shower. I put on makeup to cover the dark circles under my eyes. I chose my outfit carefully, not too dressed up, not too casual. I wanted to look like someone who was doing fine, someone who wasn't devastated by a breakup. Walking onto campus felt like walking into a minefield. Marcus and I had so many mutual friends, so many shared spaces. I knew I'd run into him eventually, and I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to be the version of myself that wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. I made it through my first class without incident, but as I was walking to my second class, I saw him. Marcus was sitting on a bench outside the psychology building, and he wasn't alone. Sarah was there too, laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm like she owned him. My first instinct was to turn around, to find another route to class. But Katie's words echoed in my mind, "Don't give him the satisfaction." So I walked past them, my head held high, my expression carefully neutral. I didn't look at them directly, but I could feel Marcus watching me. I could sense his surprise that I was functioning, that I wasn't the devastated mess he'd expected. "Emma!" I kept walking. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. "Emma, wait!" Against my better judgment, I turned around. Marcus was jogging toward me, leaving Sarah behind on the bench. She looked annoyed, which gave me a small, petty satisfaction. "Hey," he said, slightly out of breath. "How are you doing?" How was I doing? I was dying inside. I was barely holding myself together. I was questioning everything I'd thought I knew about love and relationships and my own worth, but I wasn't about to tell him that. "I'm fine," I said, my voice steady. He looked surprised, like he'd expected me to be crying or angry or desperate. "Really? Because I was worried about you, the way you left the other night. I thought you might do something stupid. Something stupid. Like what? Like begging him to take me back? Like making a scene? Like proving him right about my lack of spine?" "I'm fine," I repeated. "Is there something you need?" I wanted to make sure you were okay. And I wanted to talk about how we handle this. You know, with our friends and everything. There it was. He was worried about his reputation, about how the breakup would look to our social circle. He wanted to make sure I wouldn't tell anyone he'd cheated, that I'd play along with whatever story he'd concocted. "What do you want me to tell them?" I asked. "Just that we realized we wanted different things. That it was mutual. You know, keep it simple. Mutual. Like I'd had any say in the decision. Like I'd wanted to find him in bed with another woman. Like I'd chosen to have my heart ripped out on what should have been our anniversary." "Fine," I said. "Is that all?" He looked puzzled, like he couldn't understand why I wasn't more upset. "Yeah, I guess. I'm glad you're being mature about this." Mature. That's what he called it when I didn't give him the dramatic reaction he'd expected. When I didn't beg or cry or make a scene. When I didn't come crawling back. "I have to get to class," I said, turning away from him. "Emma?" he called after me. For what it's worth, I really am sorry it ended this way. I didn't turn around. I didn't acknowledge his apology because it wasn't really an apology. It was just another way of making himself feel better, of convincing himself that he wasn't the bad guy in this story. I made it through the rest of the day on autopilot. I went to classes, took notes, participated in discussions. I ate lunch with Katie and some other friends, carefully steering the conversation away from my personal life. I acted like a normal person living a normal life, even though I felt like I was dying inside. But that evening, alone in my apartment, the facade cracked. I found myself looking at Marcus's social media, torturing myself with pictures of him and Sarah. They'd made their relationship public already, less than a week after he'd broken up with me. In the photos, they looked happy, carefree, like they'd been together for years instead of days. The comments were the worst part. Friends congratulating them, telling them how cute they were together. People who'd known about Marcus and me, who'd seen us together for 3 years, acting like our relationship had never existed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to comment on every photo, to tell everyone what had really happened. I wanted to expose Marcus for the cheater he was, to make sure everyone knew that their perfect relationship was built on lies and betrayal. But I didn't. I closed the laptop and went to bed, reminding myself that I was being mature, that I was taking the high road, that I was proving Marcus wrong by not falling apart. The next few weeks passed in a blur of forced normalcy. I went to classes, did my homework, worked my shifts at the bookstore. I smiled when people asked how I was doing. I deflected questions about Marcus with vague comments about growing apart. I played the part of the well-adjusted ex-girlfriend who was handling her breakup with grace. But inside I was rotting. Every day felt like a performance, and I was exhausted from pretending to be okay. I'd lost weight from stress and lack of appetite. I had trouble sleeping, and when I did sleep, I dreamed about Marcus and Sarah, about that moment when I'd walked into his bedroom and found them together. The worst part was that Marcus seemed to be thriving. I'd see him around campus, laughing with friends, his arm around Sarah like he didn't have a care in the world. He'd nod at me when our paths crossed, a casual acknowledgement that made my stomach turn. Like we were acquaintances instead of former lovers. Like our 3-year relationship had meant nothing. One evening, about a month after the breakup, I was working late at the bookstore when Marcus walked in. He was alone, which was unusual. Sarah had been attached to his hip ever since they'd gone public. "Hey," he said, approaching the counter where I was organizing inventory. "I didn't know you were working tonight." "I picked up an extra shift," I said, not looking up from the books I was sorting. "Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something," he said. "There's a party this weekend at Jake's place. Sarah really wants to go, but I know you'll probably be there too, and I don't want things to be weird." Things to be weird. Like it wasn't already weird that he was dating the girl he'd cheated on me with. Like it wasn't weird that he'd destroyed our relationship and then acted like nothing had happened. "I wasn't planning on going," I said. "Really? But you love Jake's parties. You never miss them." He was right. I did love Jake's parties. They were legendary on campus, and I'd been to everyone for the past 2 years. But the thought of watching Marcus and Sarah together, of seeing them happy and in love while I was still struggling to get through each day, was unbearable. "I have other plans," I lied. "Come on, Emma. You don't have to avoid parties because of me. We're adults. We can be in the same room without it being a big deal." Easy for him to say. He wasn't the one who'd been blindsided and betrayed. He wasn't the one who had to watch his ex-boyfriend flaunt his new relationship in front of everyone they knew. "I'm not avoiding anything," I said. "I just have other plans." Marcus leaned against the counter, studying my face. "You know, I have to say I'm impressed. When we first broke up, I thought you'd have a harder time with it. But you're handling it really well." There it was again. That backhanded compliment that made my skin crawl. The implication that he'd expected me to fall apart, that my ability to function was somehow surprising. "Thanks," I said dryly. "I mean it. You're being really mature about everything. A lot of girls would have made this whole thing dramatic and messy, but you're not. You're just moving on, moving on." If only he knew how far from the truth that was. If only he knew that I spent most nights crying myself to sleep, that I'd lost 15 pounds from stress, that I couldn't listen to any of the songs we used to sing together without feeling like I was going to throw up. "I'm trying," I said, because what else could I say? "Well, I appreciate it, and I hope you know that I really do want us to be friends eventually. I mean, not right now, obviously, but maybe someday. We were good together, Emma, just not in the way we thought. Friends." He wanted us to be friends. Like we were casual acquaintances who'd tried dating and realized we weren't compatible. Like he hadn't ripped my heart out and stomped on it. Like he hadn't made me question everything I thought I knew about myself and my worth. Maybe, I said, just to end the conversation. Marcus smiled, that same charming smile that had made me fall in love with him in the first place. Good. That's really good. I'll let you get back to work. After he left, I locked myself in the bookstore's tiny employee bathroom and cried until I couldn't breathe. His casual dismissal of our relationship, his assumption that I'd want to be friends, his praise for my maturity, it all felt like salt in an open wound. But it was his earlier words that haunted me most. I thought you'd have a harder time with it. He'd expected me to fall apart. He'd expected me to prove him right, to come crawling back, to show him that I was as weak and desperate as he'd claimed. The fact that I hadn't done those things seemed to surprise him, but it also didn't seem to change his fundamental opinion of me. I was still the pathetic ex-girlfriend in his mind. I was just better at hiding it than he'd expected. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, pretending to be okay while slowly dying inside. I couldn't keep playing the role of the mature ex-girlfriend who was handling her breakup with grace. It was killing me, and it wasn't even working. Marcus still saw me as weak, still expected me to come crawling back eventually, so I decided to disappear. Not literally, of course, but I decided to remove myself from his orbit completely. No more casual encounters on campus. No more mutual friends asking how I was doing. No more pretending that seeing him with Sarah didn't destroy me a little more each time. I started by changing my schedule. I switched sections for the classes I had with Marcus, even though it meant taking some at inconvenient times. I stopped eating lunch in the common areas where our friend groups congregated. I picked up more shifts at the bookstore, using work as an excuse to avoid social events. It was lonely, but it was better than the alternative. Better than constantly performing strength I didn't feel. Better than watching Marcus live his best life while I struggled to get through each day. The isolation gave me time to think, time to really examine what had happened to me. And slowly, gradually, I started to get angry. Not just hurt. I'd been hurt since the moment I'd found them together. But genuinely, deeply angry. Angry at Marcus for cheating, for lying, for making me feel like I was crazy for being suspicious. Angry at myself for ignoring all the red flags, for staying in a relationship that was clearly one-sided, for being so desperate for love that I'd accepted scraps of affection and convinced myself they were enough. But mostly, I was angry at the person I'd become. The person who'd always apologized first, who'd always made excuses for his behavior, who'd twisted herself into knots trying to be the perfect girlfriend for someone who didn't deserve her. The anger was clean and sharp, and it felt better than the crushing sadness I'd been carrying. It gave me energy, purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. I started working out, channeling my rage into physical exercise. I threw myself into my studies, determined to excel in ways that had nothing to do with Marcus or his opinion of me. Slowly, I started to rebuild myself. Not the version of myself that had been Marcus's girlfriend, but someone new, someone stronger. Someone who wouldn't accept being treated like garbage, who wouldn't beg for love from someone who didn't value her. I was getting better. I was getting stronger. And I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could prove Marcus wrong about me. But the real transformation didn't begin until I met David. It was a Tuesday evening in late spring, about 3 months after the breakup. I was working alone in the bookstore, organizing a shipment of new releases, when he walked in. He was tall, with dark hair and the kind of easy confidence that drew attention without trying. He moved through the store like he owned it, but not in an arrogant way, more like someone who was comfortable in his own skin. He approached the counter with a specific book in mind, something about entrepreneurship and startup culture. As I rang up his purchase, he struck up a conversation about the book, about business, about his plans to start his own company after graduation. There was something magnetic about him, something that made me forget about my heartbreak for the first time in months. He was smart, funny, ambitious in a way that felt genuine rather than boastful. And when he asked if I'd like to get coffee sometime, I surprised myself by saying yes. David was nothing like Marcus. Where Marcus had been casual and non-committal, David was intentional and focused. Where Marcus had made me feel like I was asking for too much, David made me feel like I was worth pursuing. Where Marcus had been content to drift through college without any real goals, David had plans, ambitions, a vision for his future that he was actively working toward. Our first date turned into a 3-hour conversation about everything and nothing. He told me about his business ideas, his dreams of creating something that would make a real difference in the world. I found myself sharing my own ambitions, dreams I'd pushed aside during my relationship with Marcus because they'd seemed too big, too impractical. "You should go for it," David said when I mentioned my secret desire to start my own business someday. "Life's too short to play it safe." It was such a simple statement, but it hit me like a revelation. For 3 years, I'd been playing it safe. I'd been settling for less than I deserved, in love and in life. I'd been so focused on maintaining a relationship that was slowly killing my spirit that I'd forgotten who I was underneath it all. David and I started seeing each other regularly, though I was careful not to call it dating. I wasn't ready for another relationship, wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. But he was patient, understanding, willing to let me set the pace. Slowly, I started to remember what it felt like to be valued. David listened when I talked. He asked about my day and actually cared about the answer. He supported my goals and encouraged me to dream bigger. He made me feel like I was interesting, attractive, worth pursuing. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. After months of feeling broken and worthless, David made me remember that I was capable of inspiring genuine interest and affection, that I was worth more than the scraps Marcus had been willing to give me. We'd been seeing each other for about a month when I ran into Marcus again. I was leaving the library with David, laughing at something he'd said, when I saw Marcus across the quad. He was staring at us with an expression I couldn't quite read, surprise maybe, or confusion. For a moment, our eyes met across the distance. I felt a familiar flutter of anxiety, that old instinct to apologize for something, to make myself smaller. But then David said something that made me laugh, and I turned away from Marcus without acknowledging him. It was a small moment, but it felt like a victory. I hadn't apologized for being happy. I hadn't felt guilty for moving on. I'd simply turned away and continued living my life. That night, I got a text from Marcus. "Saw you with someone today. Good for you. I'm happy you're doing well." I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decode its meaning. Was he genuinely happy for me? Or was he surprised that I'd moved on so quickly that I wasn't still pining for him like he'd expected? I decided I didn't care. I deleted the message without responding and went back to my evening with David. Summer came and went in a blur of new experiences and growing confidence. David and I had officially started dating, though I was still careful about the pace. He never pushed, never made me feel like I owed him anything. He just consistently showed up, consistently chose me, consistently made me feel like I mattered. By the time senior year started, I was a different person than I'd been 6 months earlier. I'd gained back the weight I'd lost from stress, but I'd also gained muscle from all the working out. I'd changed my major to business, inspired by David's entrepreneurial dreams and my own rediscovered ambitions. I'd started writing a business plan for a company I wanted to start after graduation. I felt strong, confident, capable. I felt like myself again, but better. Like the person I'd been before Marcus had slowly convinced me I was asking for too much from life. And then, one day in early October, I discovered something that would change everything. I was researching successful young entrepreneurs for a class project when I came across an article about rising stars in the tech industry. The headline caught my attention: "Young Innovators to Watch, the Next Generation of Tech Billionaires." I was skimming through the profiles when I saw a familiar name, David Chen, founder and CEO of a revolutionary new app that was disrupting the social media landscape. The article described him as a brilliant young entrepreneur who'd built his company from the ground up while still in college. David Chen, my David. I read the article 3 times, trying to process what I was learning. David wasn't just some college student with big dreams. He was already successful, already making waves in the tech world. His app had been downloaded millions of times. He'd secured major funding from venture capitalists. He was, according to the article, well on his way to becoming one of the youngest millionaires in the country, and he'd never mentioned any of it. I thought back to all our conversations about entrepreneurship, about his plans to start a company someday. He'd let me believe he was just a dreamer, just someone with ideas and ambitions. He'd never mentioned that he'd already achieved more than most people do in a lifetime. Why hadn't he told me? Was he testing me, seeing if I'd like him without knowing about his success? Or was he just modest, the kind of person who didn't feel the need to brag about his achievements? I was still processing this revelation when David picked me up for dinner that night. He seemed the same as always, charming, attentive, interested in my day. But now I couldn't help but see him differently, wondering what else he hadn't told me about his life. "I read an interesting article today," I said over dinner, testing the waters. "Yeah? What about young entrepreneurs, tech innovators, people who are changing the world?" David's expression didn't change, but I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. "Sounds inspiring." It was. There was this one guy, David Chen, who's apparently built this incredible company while still in college. Same name as you, actually. Now he definitely looked uncomfortable. He set down his fork and studied my face. "What exactly did you read?" "Everything," I said. "About your company, your success, your net worth." "Why didn't you tell me?" David was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "I wanted you to know me for who I am, not what I've accomplished. I wanted to know that you were interested in me, not my bank account. Did you think I was a gold digger?" "No," he said quickly. "Not at all. But I've learned that success can complicate relationships. People treat you differently when they know you have money. They want things from you, or they feel intimidated, or they assume you're arrogant. I just wanted us to get to know each other without all that noise." I could understand that, but it still stung a little. "Did you not trust me?" "I trusted you," he said. "I trust you. That's why I didn't mind when you found out. I was planning to tell you soon anyway. Things are getting serious between us, and I don't want to have secrets." Things were getting serious between us. The acknowledgement made my heart race, but in a good way. After Marcus, who'd been allergic to any conversation about the future, David's openness about his feelings was refreshing. "So what does this mean?" I asked. "For us, I mean." "It means whatever you want it to mean," David said. "I'm still the same person I was yesterday. I still have the same feelings for you. The only difference is that now you know I can afford to take you to better restaurants." I laughed despite myself. "Just better restaurants?" "Well, maybe a few other things too," he said with a smile. "But that's not what matters. What matters is that I care about you, Emma. I care about you more than I've cared about anyone in a long time." The sincerity in his voice made my chest tight with emotion. After months of feeling worthless, of believing Marcus's assessment that I was pathetic and desperate, David made me feel valuable again. Not just valuable, treasured. "I care about you too," I said, and meant it completely. That night, David told me the whole story. How he'd started his company in his dorm room 2 years ago. How he'd worked 18-hour days, living on coffee and determination. How he'd almost given up a dozen times before finally getting the breakthrough that changed everything. "The crazy part," he said, "is that I'm not even close to done. This is just the beginning. I have plans for 5 more companies, ideas that could change entire industries. I want to build something that lasts, something that makes a real difference." His passion was intoxicating. Listening to him talk about his dreams, his vision for the future, I felt inspired in a way I hadn't in years. He made me want to dream bigger, to take risks, to stop playing it safe. "I want to be part of that," I said. "Not just your success, but building something of my own too. I want to create something that matters." David's eyes lit up. "You should. You're brilliant, Emma. You have ideas and insights that could change the world. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The words hit me like a physical blow because I realized that I had let someone convince me otherwise. I'd let Marcus make me feel small, make me believe that my dreams were too big, my ambitions too unrealistic. But David saw something different in me. He saw potential, capability, strength. He saw the person I'd been before Marcus had slowly convinced me to settle for less. As our relationship deepened over the following months, I found myself transforming in ways I'd never expected. David's success didn't intimidate me, it inspired me. His confidence didn't make me feel small, it made me feel like I could be confident too. He introduced me to his world, to entrepreneurs and investors and innovators who were changing the landscape of business. I met people who'd built empires from nothing, who'd taken risks and failed and gotten back up and succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged in that world. Not as someone's girlfriend, but as someone with her own ideas, her own potential, her own future to build. I started working on my business plan with new intensity. David connected me with mentors, helped me refine my ideas, encouraged me to think bigger than I'd ever dared. What had started as a vague dream of someday starting a company became a concrete plan with timelines and goals and strategies. By spring of senior year, I'd secured seed funding for my startup. It was a platform connecting college students with internship opportunities, something I'd conceived based on my own frustrations with the traditional application process. David had helped me pitch to investors, had vouched for my capabilities, had stood beside me as I presented my vision to rooms full of successful business people. The first time someone called me a young entrepreneur to watch, I cried. Not from sadness, but from joy. From the realization that I'd become the person I'd always wanted to be, the person Marcus had convinced me I could never be. It was around this time that I started hearing things about Marcus through mutual friends. He and Sarah had broken up, apparently. She'd graduated and moved to another state for graduate school, and the long-distance thing hadn't worked out. He was single again, struggling to find direction after graduation, still living with roommates while most of our classmates had moved on to careers and adult life. I felt a strange mix of emotions when I heard the news. Not satisfaction exactly, but a kind of closure. The man who'd once made me feel like I was asking for too much from life was now struggling to figure out what to do with his own life. But I didn't dwell on it. I was too busy building my future with David, too focused on my own success to spend much time thinking about Marcus's failures. Graduation came and went in a blur of celebration and new beginnings. I'd been accepted to a prestigious accelerator program in Silicon Valley, where I'd spend the summer refining my business model and networking with other entrepreneurs. David was expanding his company's operations, opening new offices in 3 different cities. We were both busy, both focused on our careers, but we made time for each other. Our relationship had evolved into something deeper than I'd thought possible. We were partners in every sense of the word, supporting each other's dreams, challenging each other to grow, building a life together that was bigger than either of us could have created alone. It was during a quiet moment in late summer, sitting on the balcony of David's new penthouse apartment, that he told me something that changed everything. "I have something to tell you," he said, his voice unusually serious. Something I probably should have mentioned earlier. My heart skipped a beat. After everything we'd been through, after all the honesty and openness we'd built together, what could he possibly have kept from me? "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. David took a deep breath. "I knew Marcus before I met you. We went to high school together." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "We were in the same class. We weren't friends or anything, but we knew each other. He was kind of a dick back then too. Always thought he was better than everyone else, always talking about how he was going to be so successful after high school." I stared at him, trying to process this information. "And you never thought to mention this?" "I should have," David said. "But honestly, I'd almost forgotten about him until you mentioned his name early in our relationship. And by then, I could see how much he'd hurt you, and I didn't want to complicate things." "Complicate things how?" David ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "Because he used to talk about you. In high school. He had this massive crush on you, always said he was going to ask you out someday. But he never did. He was too intimidated. The world seemed to tilt sideways. He had a crush on me? In high school? A huge one. He used to stare at you in the hallways, talk about how perfect you were, how he was going to marry you someday. It was actually pretty pathetic." Marcus had liked me in high school? The same Marcus who'd later made me feel like I was lucky to have him, who'd convinced me that I was asking for too much, who'd cheated on me and then predicted I'd come crawling back. "Why didn't he ever say anything?" I asked. "Because he was a coward," David said simply. "He was too afraid of rejection to actually take a chance, so he just pined from afar and convinced himself that someday he'd be worthy of you." I thought back to our early days together in college, how Marcus had seemed almost surprised that I'd agreed to go out with him. How he'd been so eager to please at first, so grateful for my attention. Had that been genuine? Or had it been the culmination of years of wanting something he'd thought he couldn't have? "And then he got me," I said slowly. "And he realized I wasn't as perfect as he'd imagined." "No," David said firmly. "That's not what happened. What happened is that he got you, and he couldn't believe his luck. But instead of treating you like the prize you were, he became terrified of losing you. So he started pulling away, started making you feel like you were the one who was lucky to have him. It was a defense mechanism. That doesn't excuse what he did. No, it doesn't. What he did was unforgivable, but it explains it. He was so afraid of you leaving him that he convinced himself you weren't worth keeping. It was easier than admitting that he was insecure and scared. I sat in silence, trying to reconcile this new information with everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Marcus. Had our entire 3-year relationship been built on his insecurity? Had he cheated on me not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much and didn't know how to handle it? "There's something else," David said quietly. "What?" "He's been asking about you. Through mutual friends from high school. He heard about your success, about us, and he's been trying to get information about your life." My stomach turned. "What kind of information?" "Just how you're doing. Whether you're happy. Whether you ever talk about him." David paused. I think he's realizing what he lost. The words should have given me some satisfaction, but instead they just made me feel tired. I'd spent so much energy getting over Marcus, building myself back up from the wreckage he'd left behind. The thought of him inserting himself back into my life, even peripherally, was exhausting. "I don't care," I said, and realized I meant it. "I don't care what he's doing or what he's thinking. I'm not that person anymore." David smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since this conversation started. "Good. Because the person you are now is incredible. You're successful, confident, strong. You've built something amazing, and you're just getting started." He was right. I wasn't the same person who'd been devastated by Marcus's betrayal. I wasn't the girl who'd believed she was asking for too much from life. I was a successful entrepreneur, a woman who'd turned her pain into purpose, who'd built something meaningful from the ashes of her broken heart. But David's revelation about Marcus had planted a seed of something in my mind. Not sadness or regret, but a kind of cold curiosity. What would Marcus think if he could see me now? What would he think if he knew that the girl he'd predicted would come crawling back had instead crawled her way to the top? I pushed the thought aside. I had better things to focus on than Marcus's opinion of my life. I had a business to run, a future to build, a man who loved me for who I was rather than who he thought I should be. But the seed had been planted, and over the following months, as my success grew and my confidence soared, that seed began to grow into something else entirely. Something that would eventually bloom into the most satisfying revenge I could have ever imagined. The turning point came 6 months later, during what should have been a routine business dinner. My company had just secured a major contract with a Fortune 500 corporation, and David had suggested we celebrate at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. I was riding high on success, feeling invincible in my new designer dress and the confidence that came with knowing I'd earned every bit of my good fortune. We were seated at a corner table, champagne glasses raised in a toast to my latest achievement, when I saw him. Marcus was across the restaurant, dressed in an ill-fitting suit that had seen better days, sitting across from a woman who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Even from a distance, I could see the desperation in his posture, the way he was leaning forward, talking too much, trying too hard. "Is that who I think it is?" David asked, following my gaze. I nodded, unable to look away. Marcus looked older, tired, like life had been wearing him down. His hair was thinning, and he'd gained weight around his middle. But it wasn't his physical appearance that struck me most. It was the aura of failure that seemed to surround him like a cloud. He looks... I paused, searching for the right word. "Defeated." "He should be," David said, his voice hard. "He had everything and threw it away." As we watched, Marcus's date excused herself to go to the bathroom. I saw her pull out her phone as she walked away, probably texting someone about what a disaster the evening was. Marcus sat alone at his table, staring into his wine glass with the expression of a man who'd lost everything that mattered. "I want to know what happened to him," I said suddenly. David raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I want to know how he ended up like this. What went wrong after college? How the man who once told me I'd come crawling back became..." I gestured toward Marcus's table. "That? Why does it matter?" That was the question, wasn't it? Why did it matter? I'd moved on, built a successful life, found love with an incredible man. Marcus was part of my past, a chapter I'd closed and moved beyond. So why did seeing him like this stir something in me that felt suspiciously like unfinished business? "Because," I said slowly, "I think I need to understand what I escaped from. I need to know that the path I chose was the right one." David studied my face for a long moment. "Okay, I can find out. I still have friends from high school who keep in touch with people from our graduating class. Give me a few days." True to his word, David came back to me 3 days later with a complete picture of Marcus's post-college life. And it was even more pathetic than I'd imagined. After graduation, Marcus had drifted from job to job, never quite finding his footing. He'd worked in sales, customer service, even a brief stint as a substitute teacher. Nothing had stuck. He'd moved back in with his parents after college, then to a series of increasingly shabby apartments as his financial situation deteriorated. Sarah, his college girlfriend, had indeed left him for graduate school, but it hadn't been mutual. She'd broken up with him via text message, citing his lack of ambition and inability to commit to anything meaningful. The breakup had apparently sent Marcus into a spiral of depression and self-pity that he'd never fully recovered from. He'd tried to start his own business at one point, some kind of consulting firm that never got off the ground. He'd borrowed money from friends and family, made grand promises about future success, then watched everything fall apart when he couldn't deliver on any of his commitments. The failure had cost him several friendships and left him deeper in debt. The worst part, David told me, is that he keeps talking about you, even now, 3 years later. He tells people that you were the one who got away, that breaking up with you was the biggest mistake of his life. He's romanticized your entire relationship, turned it into this epic love story where he was the fool who let the perfect woman slip through his fingers. I felt a cold anger settling in my chest. He's rewriting history. Completely. According to him, you were the love of his life, and he was just too young and stupid to realize it. He's conveniently forgotten about the cheating, the lies, the way he treated you like you were disposable. The anger was building now, not the hot, impulsive rage I'd felt in the immediate aftermath of our breakup, but something colder and more calculating. Marcus had destroyed our relationship, made me feel worthless and desperate, then had the audacity to turn our story into some romantic tragedy where he was the victim. "There's more," David continued. "He's been trying to find you. He's looked you up on social media, asked mutual friends for your contact information. He even went by your parents' house last month, hoping to get your address." My blood ran cold. "He went to my parents' house? Your mom didn't tell you?" "She said she turned him away, told him you were doing well and didn't want to be contacted. But apparently he was persistent, kept saying he just wanted to apologize to make things right." I hadn't talked to my parents about Marcus in over a year. The fact that he'd shown up at their house, disrupted their peace, used them as a way to try to get to me, made my hands shake with fury. What exactly did he say to them? That he'd made a terrible mistake, that he needed to see you, that he had something important to tell you. Your mom said he looked desperate, almost unhinged. She was actually a little scared of him. My mother scared of Marcus. The same mother who'd once thought he was such a nice boy, and had been disappointed when we'd broken up? The thought of him frightening her, of him invading my family's space in his quest to absolve himself of his guilt, pushed me over an edge I didn't even know I was approaching. "I want to destroy him," I said quietly. David looked surprised. "What?" "I want to destroy him. Completely. I want him to understand exactly what he lost when he cheated on me. I want him to see what his life could have been if he'd been a better man. I want him to know that every single thing he's achieved since our breakup pales in comparison to what I've built without him." "Emma." "No, listen to me. He's been telling people that I was the one who got away, that losing me was his biggest mistake. He's been trying to contact me, bothering my parents, turning our relationship into some sob story where he's the tragic hero who lost his great love. He wants to rewrite history? Fine. But I'm going to show him what history actually looks like." David was quiet for a long moment. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Marcus always wanted things he couldn't have. In high school, he wanted me but was too scared to try. In college, he had me but was too insecure to appreciate it. Now he wants me back, but it's too late. He's spent 3 years learning that the grass isn't greener on the other side. He's realized that cheating on me was the worst decision he ever made, and I'm going to make sure he understands just how right he is." The plan started forming in my mind even as I spoke. It was elegant in its simplicity, devastating in its potential impact. Marcus had always been motivated by jealousy, by the desire to possess things that other people had. He'd cheated on me partly because he could, but partly because he'd been insecure about his own worth. He'd needed to prove to himself that he was desirable, that he had options. But what if I could show him that while he'd been playing games, I'd been building an empire? What if I could demonstrate that his biggest mistake had been my greatest opportunity? What if I could make him understand that losing me hadn't just cost him a girlfriend, it had cost him a future he couldn't even have imagined? "I want to invite him to our wedding," I said suddenly. David nearly choked on his wine. "Our what?" "Our wedding. I want to marry you, David." I want to marry you, and I want Marcus to be there to watch it happen. Emma, we've never even talked about marriage. We have now. I love you, David. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build a future together, create something beautiful and lasting and real, and I want Marcus to see it all. I want him to understand that while he's been stumbling through life, mourning the loss of what he threw away, I've been building something he could never have given me. David stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Are you proposing to me as part of a revenge plot? I'm proposing to you because I love you and want to marry you. The revenge is just a bonus. He laughed despite himself. You're insane. I'm in love. There's a difference. Is there? Because right now you sound like you want to marry me just to spite your ex-boyfriend. I reached across the table and took his hands in mine. David, I would marry you tomorrow if Marcus had never existed. I would marry you if I never saw him again for the rest of my life. I love you completely, independently of anything that happened in my past. But the fact that marrying you would also be the ultimate revenge against the man who tried to destroy me, that's just perfect symmetry. David studied my face, looking for something I wasn't sure I was ready to show him. You really want to marry me? I really want to marry you. And you want to rub it in Marcus's face. I want to show him exactly what he lost. I want him to see that his biggest mistake was my biggest opportunity. I want him to understand that while he's been wallowing in self-pity and regret, I've been building a life that's better than anything he could have imagined. David was quiet for a long moment, considering. You know, there's something you should know about Marcus and me. Something else from high school. What? He didn't just have a crush on you. He had a crush on me too. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? It was senior year. We were both in the same AP literature class and he started, I don't know, paying attention to me. Sitting next to me, asking me to study together, finding excuses to talk to me. I thought he was just being friendly until he asked me to prom. I stared at David, trying to process this information. Marcus asked you to prom? He did. And when I turned him down, gently, because I wasn't interested in guys back then, he got really upset. Angry, actually. He said I was making a mistake, that I'd regret it, that I didn't know what I was missing. Oh my God, it gets worse. After I turned him down, he started spreading rumors about me. Nothing explicitly homophobic, but just enough to make people question my sexuality. He told people I was confused about what I wanted, that I was too good for anyone in our school. It was subtle, but it was definitely malicious. I felt sick. He was rejected by both of us. In high school, yes, and now he's lost both of us to each other. If you want to talk about poetic justice, I can't think of anything more perfect. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture that was more beautiful than anything I could have planned. Marcus had spent high school wanting both David and me. He'd been rejected by David and had been too scared to even try with me. Then, in college, he'd gotten me but had been too insecure to keep me. Now David and I were together, successful and happy, and building a life that Marcus could only dream of. He's going to lose his mind, I said. Probably. Are you okay with that? I thought about it seriously. Was I okay with deliberately causing Marcus psychological pain? Was I okay with using my wedding, one of the most important days of my life, as a weapon against someone who'd hurt me? The answer was yes. Unequivocally, completely yes. He hurt me, I said simply. He cheated on me, lied to me, made me feel worthless. He predicted I'd come crawling back to him, and when I didn't, he started stalking me. He's been bothering my parents, rewriting our history, playing the victim. He deserves to see what he lost. He deserves to understand that his actions have consequences. David squeezed my hands. Okay, let's do it. Really? Really? I love you, Emma. I want to marry you. And if our wedding happens to destroy your ex-boyfriend's delusions about himself, well, that's just a bonus. I leaned across the table and kissed him, feeling a rush of love and gratitude and anticipation. I love you too. So how do we do this? How do we make sure Marcus gets a front row seat to his own humiliation? I smiled, feeling the cold satisfaction of a plan coming together. Leave that to me. The first step was the proposal. I wanted it to be public, spectacular, impossible to ignore. I wanted Marcus to hear about it through the grapevine, to understand that I wasn't just moving on, I was ascending to a level of happiness he'd never be able to reach. David and I had been planning to attend our 5-year college reunion, which was scheduled for the following month. It would be perfect. All of our mutual friends would be there, including people who'd known Marcus and me as a couple. The story would spread quickly, ensuring that Marcus would hear about it within hours. I spent weeks planning every detail. I had a custom ring designed, something that would photograph beautifully and spark conversations about its obvious expense. I arranged for a professional photographer to be there, disguised as a reunion attendee, to capture the moment. I even tipped off a few key people about what was going to happen, ensuring that word would spread quickly. The night of the reunion, I wore a dress that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. David looked incredible in his custom-tailored suit, every inch the successful entrepreneur he'd become. We moved through the crowd like celebrities, people gravitating toward us, asking about our careers, our lives, our obvious success. I waited until the perfect moment, when the room was full but not overcrowded, when the lighting was ideal, when I knew I had an audience. Then I dropped to one knee in the middle of the dance floor and pulled out the ring. "David Chen," I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, "you've made me the happiest, most successful, most fulfilled woman in the world. Will you marry me?" The room erupted in applause and cheers as David said yes, as he slipped the ring onto his finger, as we kissed surrounded by our friends and former classmates. I heard phones clicking, capturing the moment, knew that photos would be on social media within minutes. But the best part was seeing the faces of people who'd known Marcus and me together. The shock, the recognition of what this meant, the understanding that I'd not only moved on but had moved up in ways that made my previous relationship look like a childhood crush. "Did you see Emma's proposal?" I heard someone whisper. "That ring must have cost more than my car. And David Chen? He's like a millionaire. They're both so successful. Remember when she was dating that loser Marcus? Thank God she dodged that bullet." The story spread exactly as I'd hoped. By the time David and I left the reunion, our engagement was the talk of the evening. People were posting photos, sharing stories, marveling at the fairy tale romance between two successful young entrepreneurs. I knew Marcus would hear about it. I knew someone would tell him, probably multiple someones. I knew he'd see the photos, read the comments, understand exactly what I'd achieved while he'd been wallowing in self-pity. But I didn't have to wait long to see his reaction. 3 days later, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I knew who it was before I answered. "Emma?" His voice was tentative, unsure. "It's Marcus." "I know," I said, my voice cool and professional. "What do you want?" I heard about your engagement." "Congratulations." "Thank you. I wanted to talk to you. About us. About what happened." "There's nothing to talk about, Marcus. What happened was 3 years ago. I've moved on." "I know, but I haven't. I can't. Emma, I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." There it was. The apology I'd once desperately wanted to hear. The acknowledgement of his wrongdoing, the admission of guilt, the expression of regret. 3 years ago, these words would have meant everything to me. Now they felt hollow, meaningless, far too late. "I appreciate the apology," I said, "but it doesn't change anything." "It could, though. Emma, I know you're engaged, but marriages can be broken. People change their minds. I could make this right. I could give you everything you ever wanted." The audacity of his words took my breath away. After everything he'd done, after all the pain he'd caused, he actually thought he could waltz back into my life and convince me to leave David? He thought he could make this right by asking me to destroy my current happiness? "Marcus," I said, my voice deadly calm, "you seem to be under the impression that I'm the same person I was 3 years ago, that I'm still the girl who would accept being treated like garbage as long as it meant I could keep you. But I'm not that person anymore. I know you've changed. I can see how successful you've become, how confident. It's incredible and I'm proud of you. But Emma, deep down, you're still the same person. You're still the woman I fell in love with." "You didn't fall in love with me?" I said. "You were obsessed with the idea of me. You wanted to possess me, to control me, to keep me small enough that I wouldn't realize I deserved better. Well, guess what? I figured it out anyway." "That's not true. I loved you. I love you now, more than I've ever loved anyone. If you loved me, you wouldn't have cheated on me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have made me feel like I was asking for too much when I wanted basic respect and commitment. If you loved me, you wouldn't have predicted that I'd come crawling back to you." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "You heard about that?" "I heard about all of it, Marcus. I heard about how you've been telling people that I was the one who got away. I heard about how you've been trying to contact me, bothering my parents. I heard about how you've rewritten our entire relationship into some tragic love story where you're the misunderstood hero. I was trying to find you because I needed to apologize. I needed to make things right. You were trying to find me because you're unhappy with your life and you think I'm the key to fixing it. But I'm not, Marcus. I'm not your salvation or your second chance or your way back to happiness. I'm just a woman who's moved on to better things. Better things? You mean David? There was something in his tone, a bitterness that told me he knew exactly who David was. Yes, I mean David, my fiancé, the man I'm going to marry. Do you know we went to high school together? I do. Do you know he rejected me when I asked him to prom me? So he was going to play that card. I know about that too. Then you know this is just revenge. You're marrying him to get back at me. I laughed, genuinely amused by his narcissism. Marcus, I hate to break it to you, but my entire life doesn't revolve around you. I'm marrying David because I love him, because he's an incredible man who treats me like I'm worth something. The fact that you once had a crush on him is just a coincidence. Is it? Or is it the perfect way to hurt me? If it hurts you, that's your problem. I'm not responsible for your feelings about my choices. Emma, please, just give me a chance. One conversation, face to face. Let me show you that I've changed, that I can be the man you deserve. You had 3 years to be the man I deserved. You chose to be someone else instead. I was young. I was stupid. I was scared of how much I loved you, so I sabotaged it. But I'm different now. I've learned from my mistakes. Have you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're making the same mistakes. You're still trying to manipulate me, still trying to convince me that your feelings matter more than my choices. You're still acting like you're entitled to my time and attention. I'm not entitled to anything. I'm just asking for a chance, and I'm saying no. Marcus, I'm getting married in 6 months. I'm happy, successful, and in love with an incredible man. I'm not interested in rehashing the past or giving you closure or helping you work through your guilt. I've moved on, and I suggest you do the same. I can't move on. Not without knowing that we at least tried to fix this. There's nothing to fix. We're not broken, Marcus. We're over. We've been over for 3 years. Please, Emma, I'm begging you. Just one conversation. One chance to explain. The desperation in his voice should have made me feel sorry for him. Instead, it filled me with a cold satisfaction. This was Marcus finally understanding what he'd lost. This was him realizing that his casual dismissal of our relationship had cost him everything. This was him learning that some mistakes can't be undone. I'll tell you what, I said, making a decision that would change everything. I'll give you that conversation, but it's going to be on my terms. Okay, yes, whatever you want. I want you to come to my wedding. Silence. Then, what? You want to talk? You want to understand what you lost? You want to see who I've become? Come to my wedding. Watch me marry the man I love. See what my life looks like now, what I've built without you. And then, if you still think we have something to discuss, we can talk. Emma, that's cruel. Is it? Or is it just honest? You say you want to see who I've become, Marcus. Well, this is who I've become. I'm the woman who's marrying David Chen in 6 months. I'm the woman who built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. I'm the woman who took the pain you caused me and turned it into something beautiful. If you want to understand what you lost, come to my wedding and see it for yourself. I don't think I can do that. Then I guess we don't have anything to talk about. Emma, wait. No, Marcus. I'm done waiting. I waited 3 years for you to realize what you'd thrown away. I waited 3 years for you to understand that cheating on me was the worst decision you ever made. Well, now you know. And now you have a choice. Accept that invitation and face the reality of what you lost, or stay away and live with the knowledge that you were too much of a coward to confront your own mistakes. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline and satisfaction. I'd done it. I'd taken control of the narrative, turned his attempt at reconciliation into my opportunity for revenge. Whether he came to the wedding or not, I'd made my point. I wasn't the same broken girl he'd left behind. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who wouldn't be manipulated or controlled ever again. David found me sitting in my office an hour later, staring out the window at the city skyline. How did it go? He asked. I invited him to the wedding. David raised an eyebrow. And now we wait to see if he's brave enough to show up. Do you think he will? I smiled, feeling the cold satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. Oh, he'll show up. He won't be able to resist. He'll tell himself he's coming to win me back, but really he'll be coming to see what he lost. And when he does, he's going to get the education of his lifetime. The wedding planning began in earnest after that. I spared no expense, hiring the best vendors, choosing the most elegant venue, designing an event that would be talked about for years. but every decision was made with Marcus in mind. Every detail was chosen to maximize his understanding of what he'd lost. I chose a venue that was breathtakingly beautiful, a historic mansion overlooking the ocean, with gardens that looked like something from a fairy tale. I hired a wedding planner who specialized in luxury events, someone who understood that money was no object and perfection was the only acceptable outcome. The dress was custom designed by a famous designer, a creation that would have cost more than Marcus's annual salary. The flowers were flown in from 3 different countries. The menu was designed by a James Beard award-winning chef. The music was performed by a string quartet that regularly played for celebrities and dignitaries. But the most important detail was the guest list. I invited everyone who mattered: successful friends, business associates, influential people from our industry. I wanted Marcus to see that David and I moved in circles he could never access, that we'd built a life that was completely beyond his reach. I also made sure to invite several people from our college days, mutual friends who'd known Marcus and me as a couple, who would be able to appreciate the full scope of my transformation. I wanted witnesses to Marcus's humiliation, people who would spread the story of his pathetic attempt to win me back. The invitations were works of art in themselves, thick embossed cardstock with gold foil lettering, enclosed in silk-lined boxes that felt substantial in your hands. They were the kind of invitations that made you understand you were being invited to something extraordinary, something that would be remembered long after the last dance was over. And yes, I sent one to Marcus. I had it delivered to his apartment by courier, with a note attached. "You said you wanted to talk. Here's your chance. Emma." I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one. But I knew he'd received it, because 3 days later, Katie called me. "Emma, what the hell are you doing?" "I'm getting married. I thought you knew that." "I'm not talking about the wedding. I'm talking about Marcus. He called me, completely hysterical, saying you'd invited him to watch you marry David. He thinks you're having some kind of breakdown." I laughed. "If anyone's having a breakdown, it's not me. He's telling people you're obsessed with him, that you're trying to make him jealous. Let him tell people whatever he wants. Anyone with eyes can see who's obsessed with whom." "Emma, be careful." He sounded unhinged, desperate. "Men like that can be dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "What's he going to do? Show up at my wedding and make a scene?" "I'm hoping he does. It'll make the whole thing even more satisfying." "I'm serious. He's not handling this well. He's been drinking, according to mutual friends. He's been calling people at all hours, asking if they think he has a chance with you. He's convinced himself that you're still in love with him, that this wedding is just some elaborate test." The news should have worried me, but instead it thrilled me. Marcus was finally understanding what he'd lost. He was finally experiencing the kind of pain and desperation I'd felt when I'd found him with Sarah. He was finally learning that some mistakes have permanent consequences. "Good," I said. "Maybe now he'll understand how I felt when he cheated on me." "Emma, this isn't healthy. You're supposed to be planning your wedding, focusing on your future with David. Why are you so obsessed with getting revenge on Marcus?" "Because he hurt me. Because he made me feel worthless. Because he predicted I'd come crawling back to him, and I want him to see how wrong he was." "You've already proven him wrong. You're successful, you're happy, you're marrying an incredible man. Why do you need to rub his face in it?" "Because I can. Because after 3 years of him rewriting our history, turning himself into the victim, I want him to face the truth. I want him to see what he lost when he chose to cheat on me. I want him to understand that his actions have consequences." Katie was quiet for a long moment. "Just be careful. Promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." But I wasn't worried about Marcus. What could he do? Show up at my wedding drunk and make a scene? That would only make him look more pathetic, more desperate. Beg me to take him back in front of all my guests? That would be the perfect ending to my revenge. No, I wasn't worried about Marcus. I was excited about him. I was excited about the opportunity to show him exactly what he'd lost, to make him understand that his casual dismissal of our relationship had cost him everything. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of final preparations and mounting anticipation. The RSVPs came in, a who's who of successful young professionals and entrepreneurs. The gifts arrived, expensive and thoughtful, from people who genuinely cared about David and me. But the response I was most interested in never came. Marcus didn't RSVP. He didn't call, didn't text, didn't send any kind of confirmation that he'd received the invitation. For a while, I thought he might not show up at all, that he'd realized it was a trap and decided to stay away. But then, the week before the wedding, Katie called again. "He's coming," she said without preamble. What? Marcus. He's coming to your wedding. He asked me what he should wear, how he should act. He thinks, Emma, he thinks you invited him because you want him back. He thinks the whole thing is some kind of elaborate way of telling him you made a mistake. I felt a rush of excitement so intense it was almost sexual. He's actually coming? He's actually coming. And Emma, I'm worried about what he's going to do. He's been talking about fighting for you, about not giving up without a fight. He thinks this is his chance to win you back. Perfect. Perfect? Emma, this is not perfect. This is a disaster waiting to happen. He's going to show up at your wedding and make a scene. He's going to try to stop the ceremony or object or something equally insane. Let him try. It'll just make him look more pathetic. What if he doesn't just make a scene? What if he does something worse? Like what? I don't know. But desperation makes people do crazy things, and Marcus is definitely desperate. I considered this. Was I putting myself, or David, or our guests at risk by inviting Marcus to the wedding? Was my desire for revenge worth potentially dangerous consequences? The answer was still yes. I'd spent 3 years rebuilding myself from the wreckage Marcus had left behind. I'd turned my pain into purpose, my heartbreak into success. I'd become someone stronger, more confident, more capable than the girl he'd cheated on, and I wanted him to see it. I wanted him to understand what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away, what he'd never be able to get back. I can handle Marcus, I told Katie. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. I know you're not, but he is. He's still the same selfish, manipulative person who cheated on you, and now he's desperate. That's a dangerous combination. Then it's a good thing I'm not planning to be alone with him. The day of the wedding dawned clear and beautiful, with the kind of perfect weather that made you believe in fairy tales. I woke up in the bridal suite of the mansion, surrounded by my bridesmaids, feeling calm and confident and ready for whatever the day might bring. David and I had decided to see each other before the ceremony, to have a private moment together before the chaos of the wedding began. We met in the mansion's library, a room lined with ancient books and filled with morning light. "How are you feeling?" he asked, taking my hands in his. "Perfect," I said and meant it. "Ready to marry you, ready to start our life together, ready for whatever today brings. Even if Marcus shows up?" "Especially if Marcus shows up." David smiled. "You know, I love how strong you've become. The woman I fell in love with was incredible, but the woman you are now is unstoppable." "I learned from the best," I said, standing on my tiptoes to kiss him. "I learned that I deserved better than what I was accepting. I learned that I could build something beautiful from the ashes of something terrible. I learned that revenge is a dish best served cold. And are you ready to serve it?" "I've been ready for 3 years." The ceremony was scheduled for late afternoon, with the reception to follow as the sun set over the ocean. I spent the morning getting ready, surrounded by my bridesmaids, feeling like a queen preparing for her coronation. My dress was a masterpiece, fitted silk that hugged my figure perfectly, with a train that seemed to go on forever. My hair was styled in an elegant updo that showcased the diamond necklace David had given me as a wedding gift. My makeup was flawless, enhancing my features without overwhelming them. I looked like a woman who'd won at life. I looked like someone who'd taken everything the world had thrown at her and turned it into something beautiful. I looked like the kind of woman Marcus had never deserved and would never get another chance to have. As the afternoon wore on, guests began to arrive. I watched from the bridal suite window as cars pulled up the circular drive, as elegantly dressed people made their way into the mansion. I recognized most of them, friends, colleagues, family members who'd supported David and me through our journey together, but I didn't see Marcus. As the minutes ticked by, I began to wonder if he'd lost his nerve, if he'd decided at the last moment that he couldn't face the reality of what he'd lost. Then, just as I was starting to think he wouldn't show, I saw him. He was climbing out of a taxi at the end of the drive, dressed in a suit that was clearly his best, but still looked cheap compared to what everyone else was wearing. He looked nervous, uncertain, like a man walking into a situation he didn't fully understand. "He's here," I told my maid of honor, a successful entrepreneur I'd met through David's business network. "Are you sure you want to do this?" she asked. "It's not too late to have security escort him out." "I'm sure. This is exactly what I wanted." I watched Marcus walk up the drive, his movements tentative and unsure. He looked older than his years, worn down by the weight of his failures. His hair was thinning, his face was puffy from too much drinking, and his clothes hung on him like they'd been purchased for a different person. This was the man who'd once told me I'd come crawling back to him. This was the man who'd been so confident in his own appeal that he'd cheated on me without a second thought. This was the man who'd predicted I'd never find anyone better than him. Looking at him now, I felt nothing but pity and satisfaction. Cold, deep, overwhelming satisfaction. "It's time," my maid of honor said. "Are you ready?" I took one last look at Marcus, who was now standing at the edge of the crowd of guests, looking lost and out of place. He was scanning the crowd, probably looking for me, probably trying to figure out how to approach me, how to get my attention. He was about to get more attention than he'd bargained for. "I'm ready," I said, and meant it completely. The ceremony itself was perfect. I walked down the aisle to the sound of a string quartet, past rows of elegantly dressed guests, toward the man I loved. David was waiting for me at the altar, looking handsome and confident and completely devoted. But my eyes kept finding Marcus in the crowd. He was sitting in the back, probably because he'd arrived late and those were the only seats available. He was staring at me with an expression of naked longing, like a man watching something he desperately wanted but could never have. The officiant began the ceremony, and I forced myself to focus on David, on the vows we were exchanging, on the life we were promising to build together. But I was acutely aware of Marcus's presence, of the way he was watching every moment, absorbing every detail. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, I held my breath. This was Marcus's moment, his chance to make the dramatic gesture he'd probably been planning. This was when he could stand up and declare his love, beg me to reconsider, make the scene that would forever mark him as the pathetic ex-boyfriend who couldn't let go. But he didn't. He just sat there silent and miserable, watching the woman he'd lost marry the man he'd once been rejected by. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said, and David and I sealed our marriage with a kiss that felt like victory. The reception was a celebration of everything David and I had built together. The food was exquisite, the wine was expensive, the music was perfect. Our guests danced and laughed and toasted our future, clearly having the time of their lives. But Marcus looked like he was attending a funeral. He sat alone at a table in the corner, nursing a drink and watching the festivities with the expression of a man who'd lost everything that mattered. People tried to include him in conversations, but he was clearly not interested in socializing. I made sure to dance with David right in front of Marcus's table, letting him see how happy we were together, how perfectly we fit. I made sure to laugh loudly at David's jokes, to gaze into his eyes with obvious adoration, to make it clear that I was completely, utterly in love with my husband. And Marcus watched it all. He watched me be happy in a way I'd never been happy with him. He watched me laugh and smile and glow with the kind of joy that comes from being truly loved. He watched me live the life he'd made impossible for himself to be part of. It was during the father-daughter dance that he finally made his move. My father was spinning me around the dance floor, telling me how proud he was of the woman I'd become when I saw Marcus approaching. "Emma," he said, tapping my father on the shoulder. "Could I have a word?" My father looked at me, clearly recognizing Marcus and clearly not pleased to see him. "I think Emma's busy right now." "It's okay, Dad," I said. "I can spare a few minutes." We walked to a quiet corner of the reception hall, away from the noise and celebration. Marcus looked terrible up close. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands were shaking, and he smelled like he'd been drinking steadily since he'd arrived. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely beautiful." "Thank you. I can't believe you're married." "I can't believe you're actually married to him." "Why?" "Because you didn't think I was capable of finding someone better than you. Because I thought you still loved me. I thought all of this was just, I don't know, a phase, a way of getting back at me." I stared at him, genuinely amazed by his delusion. "Marcus, I don't love you. I haven't loved you for 3 years. I love David. I married David. I'm building a life with David. But we had something special. We had 3 years together. That has to count for something. It counts for exactly what it was worth to you when you cheated on me, which was nothing. I made a mistake. I've admitted that. I've apologized. What more do you want from me? I don't want anything from you. I want you to leave me alone, to stop contacting me, to stop bothering my family, to stop rewriting our history into some tragic love story. I can't do that. I can't just forget about you and move on. You were the love of my life." "No, I wasn't. I was the girlfriend you took for granted until you lost me." "There's a difference." "That's not true. I loved you. I love you now, more than I've ever loved anyone." "If that's true, then you should want me to be happy." "And I am happy, Marcus. I'm happier than I've ever been." I'm married to an incredible man, I'm successful beyond my wildest dreams, and I'm building a life that's everything I ever wanted. With him? With David? Do you know what kind of person he is? Do you know what he did to me in high school? I know he rejected you when you asked him to prom. I know you spread rumors about him afterward. I know you were cruel to him because you couldn't handle rejection. Marcus looked shocked. He told you about that. He told me everything. About the rumors, about the way you tried to hurt him, about the way you handled being turned down. It just confirmed what I already knew about your character. I was 17. I was stupid and hurt, and I reacted badly. That doesn't define who I am, doesn't it? Because you're doing the same thing now. You're upset that you can't have what you want, so you're trying to hurt the people who do have it. You're trying to convince me that my marriage is a mistake, that David is the wrong choice, that I should throw away my happiness to give you another chance. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I'm trying to save us. There is no us, Marcus. There hasn't been an us for 3 years. You destroyed us when you cheated on me, and I rebuilt myself into someone who deserves better. You think you deserve better than me? The question was asked with such genuine confusion that I almost laughed. I know I deserve better than you. I know I deserve someone who won't cheat on me, who won't lie to me, who won't make me feel like I'm asking for too much when I want basic respect and commitment. I know I deserve someone who sees my worth and values it, who supports my dreams instead of making me feel like they're too big. I supported your dreams. No, you didn't. You made me feel like my ambitions were unrealistic, like I was asking for too much from life. You made me small, Marcus. You made me feel like I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention and affection you were willing to give me. That's not what I meant to do, but it's what you did. And now you're seeing the person I became when I stopped accepting less than I deserved. You're seeing the life I built when I stopped making excuses for someone who didn't value me. Marcus looked around the reception hall, taking in the elegance, the obvious expense, the successful and happy people celebrating my marriage. This is what you wanted? This life? This is what I built. This is what I chose. This is what I created when I stopped settling for less than I deserved. And there's no room in it for me? There was never going to be room in it for you. Not after what you did. Not after the way you treated me. Not after the way you made me feel about myself. I could change. I could be better. You've had 3 years to be better. You chose to spend them feeling sorry for yourself instead. I spent them missing you. You spent them regretting the consequences of your actions. That's not the same thing as missing me. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at the floor. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with tears. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong. But Emma, I'm begging you. Please give me another chance. Please don't throw away everything we had. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm protecting everything I've built. I'm protecting my marriage, my happiness, my future. I'm protecting the life I created from the ashes of what you destroyed. So that's it? You're just going to dismiss everything we meant to each other? What we meant to each other was beautiful until you destroyed it. What we could have been was everything I dreamed of until you chose something else. What we are now is nothing. We are nothing, Marcus. We've been nothing for 3 years. I don't believe that. Then you're going to spend the rest of your life disappointed. I turned to walk away, but Marcus grabbed my arm. Emma, please, just think about this. Think about what you're giving up. Think about what we could have together. I know exactly what we could have together. I lived it for 3 years. I accepted being cheated on, lied to, taken for granted. I accepted being made to feel like I was asking for too much when I wanted basic respect. I accepted being with someone who saw me as disposable. I'm never going back to that life. I would never cheat on you again. I would never hurt you like that again. You're right, you wouldn't. Because you're never going to have the opportunity. I pulled my arm free and walked away, leaving Marcus standing alone in the corner of my reception hall. I walked back to my husband, back to my friends, back to the celebration of the life I'd built without him. But I could feel him watching me for the rest of the evening. I could sense his presence, his misery, his growing understanding that he'd lost something he would never get back. And I loved every minute of it. The evening wound down with David and me dancing to our last song, surrounded by the people who mattered most to us. Marcus had disappeared at some point, probably unable to watch any more of our happiness. As we swayed to the music, David whispered in my ear, "How do you feel?" "Complete," I said. "Like I've finally gotten everything I deserved. Even the revenge?" "Especially the revenge." We honeymooned in Europe, spending 2 weeks in the most beautiful cities in the world. But even in Paris, even in Rome, even in the most romantic places on earth, I found myself thinking about Marcus. Not with longing or regret, but with a deep, cold satisfaction. He'd seen it all. He'd seen what he'd lost, what he'd thrown away, what he'd never be able to get back. He'd seen the woman I'd become, the life I'd built, the happiness I'd found. He'd seen that his prediction about me coming crawling back had been wrong, that I was stronger than he'd ever imagined. And he'd seen me marry David. The same David who'd rejected him in high school, who'd turned him down and then had to endure his petty revenge. The same David who was now my husband, my partner, my future. The irony was perfect. The revenge was complete, and I was finally truly free. When we returned from our honeymoon, I found a letter waiting for me at my office. It was from Marcus, handwritten on cheap stationery, and it said everything I'd wanted to hear for 3 years. Emma, it began, I know I have no right to contact you, but I had to write this. I had to tell you that I understand now. I understand what I lost when I cheated on you. I understand what I threw away when I took you for granted. I understand that I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. Watching you marry David was the most painful experience of my life. Not because I lost you. I lost you 3 years ago through my own stupidity and selfishness, but because I finally understood what I'd lost. I saw how happy you are, how successful you've become, how much you've grown. I saw the woman you became when you stopped accepting less than you deserved. I know you'll never forgive me. I know you'll never give me another chance. I know I'll spend the rest of my life regretting the moment I chose to betray you. But I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand that you were right to leave me. I understand that you were right to move on. I understand that you were right to build a life without me. I hope you're happy. I hope David treats you the way you deserve to be treated all along. I hope you never have to experience the kind of pain I put you through. I hope you forget I ever existed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you, for the lies I told you, for the way I made you feel about yourself. I'm sorry for being the kind of man who could hurt someone as wonderful as you. I know it's too late for apologies. I know they don't change anything. But I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand exactly what I lost. I lost you. I read the letter twice, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Not sadness or regret, but a kind of closure. Marcus finally understood what he'd done. He finally appreciated what he'd lost. He finally realized that his actions had consequences, but it was too late. Years too late. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to remember the feeling of complete and total victory, the satisfaction of knowing that my revenge had been perfect. Marcus had learned his lesson. He'd seen what he'd lost, understood what he'd thrown away, realized that some mistakes can't be undone. He'd watched me marry another man, build a successful life, become the woman I was always meant to be. And he'd finally understood that when he'd predicted I'd come crawling back to him, he'd been wrong about everything. I hadn't come crawling back. I'd crawled forward, toward something better, toward someone who deserved me, toward a life that was everything I'd ever dreamed of. The girl who'd been devastated by his betrayal was gone. In her place was a woman who'd turned her pain into power, her heartbreak into success, her lowest moment into her greatest triumph. I never saw Marcus again after the wedding. I heard through mutual friends that he'd moved to another city, that he was trying to start over, that he was finally getting his life together. I hoped that was true. Not because I cared about his happiness, but because I wanted him to build something worth losing, so he'd understand what he'd put me through. But it didn't matter what he did with the rest of his life. The revenge was complete. The lesson was learned. The circle was closed. I'd proven him wrong about everything. I'd shown him that I was stronger than he'd thought, more capable than he'd imagined, more valuable than he'd ever appreciated. I'd shown him that his biggest mistake had been my biggest opportunity, and I'd done it all while building a life that was more beautiful than anything he could have given me. David and I went on to build an empire together. My company went public within 2 years of our marriage, making me one of the youngest female CEOs in the country. David's business expanded globally, revolutionizing the way people connected and communicated. We bought a house in the hills, had 2 beautiful children, traveled the world together. We supported each other's dreams, celebrated each other's successes, built a partnership that was everything I'd once thought was impossible. And sometimes in quiet moments I'd think about Marcus. I'd wonder if he'd seen the magazine covers, the newspaper articles, the business profiles that chronicled our continued success. I'd wonder if he'd realized that his prediction about me coming crawling back had been the most wrong he'd ever been about anything. But mostly, I didn't think about him at all, because I'd moved on to something better. I'd built a life that was everything I'd ever wanted and more. I'd proven that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting back at someone who hurt you. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming someone they could never deserve. And that's exactly what I did.